Well, exciting times. This time last year, we were all nervous about, can we make our numbers? Will our budget be sufficient, or will he be sufficiently funded? And our state legislature came through with $7 extra million. This year, we're still worried, as we always will be, but we're in a much stronger position. And now we'll hear from one of the people who makes it happen for Milford. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Al, thank you. Brian Murray, a state representative for Milford, Hopedale, Mendon, and right now for Medway, still Precinct 1 before the redistricting. And I've got to commend you on your new studio design here. Obviously a furniture upgrade from what I'm used to, so it looks like things are going pretty well
Now,
in the
you're
studio.
saying before the restructuring.
Yes.
Are you giving up the one street in Medway?
Yeah, actually a couple of streets, but yeah, so, every 10 years, all the states have to redistrict based upon the census, and you have to equalize the numbers. So for me, a state representative in Massachusetts has to have a population target of somewhere between 40 and 45,000 people. So I guess the way Milford grew, maybe even Mendon and Hopedale, I'm not sure, but I think Milford predominantly, they took away Medway Precinct 1 from the 10th Worcester District. So after this election in November, going forward in 2023, the district will be solely Hopedale, Mendon, and Milford.
See, I wanted to give away a street. You know, we joke about it, but Medway got 2 reps.
They did.
By giving away Precinct 1. You brought it up once where you said you can't represent part of a town.
No.
So you were advocating for Milford and Medway. I said, can't we give away, let's pick a street that we don't care about.
Yeah, Medway, it did put him in a unique position. So generally the way it worked, and I worked with Representative Jeff Roy out of Franklin, who had, Medway has 4 precincts, so Rep Roy had 3 and I had 1 precinct. So generally the way we worked it is our own constituents, individuals, if someone from Precinct 1 had an issue with unemployment or Department of Ed or Department of Revenue, well then, I would handle that. But any of the town-wide type issues, we both worked on them together.
Why don't we start with an overall view? It's been a year. We're coming to the end of the year now, right? July 30th?
Yeah, so the way it works, okay, the legislature is a 2-year term. As you know, every 2 years we have elections. And the calendar for legislative business is set up to accommodate that 2-year period. So, for example, this November there will be an election, and the folks who are elected will get sworn in on January 1, 2023, and that legislative session will run for all of 2023 and all of 2024, okay, continuously. And we end the formal session in that 2-year time period July 31st on the 2nd year of that session. So in the session that we're in right now, started 2021, now it's July 2022, we're coming to the end of the formal session for this session, which is the 192nd legislative term in Massachusetts. And what that means is during formal session is when you can get bills through, not necessarily controversial, but to generate debate. So the difference is informal sessions, which will continue to exist through December 31st, any one legislator could object to the bill, and it would not pass. So that's how an informal session works. Generally, you can get local bills through, things that, aren't really much of an issue, but your major pieces of legislation have to go through the formal process, and that is going to end on July 31st.
So one person, we're going to talk about gun legislation.
Well,
one person could hold that up?
Yes, in an informal session. So that's why legislation like that would never come forward in informal sessions. And you see in the press indicating, well, the legislature is going to stop, doing business July 31st. Well, yes and no. I mean, your formal sessions will end, but your informal sessions continue. And there's still a host of legislation that, doesn't generate an objection that we're still looking to get passed.
I mean, like the liquor licenses and
Exactly. Yep.
so the stuff that affects Milford
Yes.
without having any real impact on the rest of the Commonwealth can get done for the next 5 months.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. And that's exactly where I'm at with a number of bills. They're right at the goal line. They've been engrossed by the House. They got pushed over to the Senate. They're sitting in third reading. In fact, the retired clerk of the Senate is a Milford resident, Bill Welch. He was in the Senate clerks. He was the Senate clerk for over 15 years. He still goes into the office, and he volunteers for Milford Legion baseball. And I was down Saturday at the game, and I got a chance to talk to Bill. And I said, "Hey, Bill, I got a few of my Milford things sitting in your office. Can you talk to Mike?" And Mike is now the clerk. And he said, "Oh, I will. But, we've got to talk to the chair of third reading, the senator. So I'll get a hold of Senator Fatman and Senator Roush and
We'll all gang up.
ask them to, give a little, nudge to get those out." But those aren't subject to the July 31st timeframe. And in fact, once all the attention gets away from some of the more substantive bills, we'll be able to, get those over the goal line.
How about our funding Fino Field?
Well, on this particular one, I've tried a couple of times, and I've met with the park commissioners and of course Jimmy Asam, the parks director, and I know the intent, or at least the plan. And again, I'm just focusing on the baseball field because I know they've got the pool project going on. And when I submitted my request, I called it the Fino Field Athletic Complex and Baseball Field because it really is more than just a baseball field. It's the heart. It's the start of our Upper Charles Trail. So I put a request in for $500,000, and I was awarded $150,000 in the Economic Development Bill, which is right now in conference with the Senate. I feel very confident that that's going to pass and the governor's going to sign it. It's a $4 billion economic development bill that goes all across all areas of the state.
So if the governor cuts off one, he's going to alienate the whole legislature.
Yeah, so I really think that this will pass. And like I was talking to Jimmy Asam, when I was down at Fino on Saturday at the Legion game, and he was very happy. And I said, well, use this as your initiative, use this as your spark to try to get that project underway in terms of the kind of work that you need to do around the park. And as you know, work needs to be done. I mean, there are storage trailers there. They're working out of storage trailers and have been for years. So it's a long time coming. Milford now has hosted the State Legion tournament 3 out of the last 6 seasons.
Wow.
Which is, something to be proud of. And the state wants to come here, and I think increased facilities will only allow more of that kind of activity to come to our town.
Now, Fino, though, is not just baseball.
Correct.
I mean, there was, years ago, there was some objections to say, if it's just a Legion field, then the funding is more of in question. But now there's Pop Warner down there, there's all sorts of soccer down there.
It's an athletic complex, and I think what he's talking about is the kind of infrastructure, facility, buildings for storage, keep some of their equipment and stuff, restrooms, because the restrooms down there are deplorable, that kind of infrastructure to really upgrade it to a first-class facility. And you'll get all kinds of outside interest into tournaments, college-level teams, things that can really bring something into the town. Because when these things occur, and you've been to enough tournaments, soccer tournaments over your life, when you go to a particular town, you're there for the duration. So you've got to get something to eat. You probably got some downtime, and maybe you got to go buy something. You're going to bring in some commerce to the community, and that's a benefit to Milford.
Well, it's also the image.
Yes.
At the end of the day, when people come to Milford, I mean, we want them to walk away saying, nice town, well run, well maintained. If it's all kind of trailer trucks and,
Yeah,
it doesn't give the same, think about when you spearheaded the football soccer field up at the high
sure.
school.
Yeah, yeah,
What a difference image-wise
right.
before and after.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a very successful project, and thank you very much for your help with that. And, it really has changed, I think, the image of Milford High School. I mean, that's like a small college athletic complex. I've been to places like Curry College and some of these other places, and I'm sorry, they don't have anything over what we have in Milford for tennis, track, multi-purpose field, football, lacrosse, soccer, softball. It's a tremendous facility, absolutely.
And I think the next one, hopefully, is putting together a world-class field house when we do the new high school.
Yeah, I mean, that the school committee, I've had some conversations with them about it. I know they've got a second notice of intent in with SBA. They're on the starting point of that. They've really got to look into exactly, what they need to have done and what physically can be done on the site they have. The good thing about that building, when it was built in 1973, it was built for the ages. So I think that you can go up on those buildings if you wanted to. The pod system is good because you could do work on, section C and D while, A and B are still usable. So you could do a phased renovation. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities there. There really are. But as you know, and you've been involved a lot, a school renovation project is like a second job. So you've got to get individuals on that committee who are committed to it and willing to do the kind of work and the research to come up with a plan and then go forward with the funding.
Well, I mean, that's when we look at Woodland, Aldo and Jonathan.
Exactly.
I mean, everybody knew, you felt comfortable that if there was copper wire needed, we threw a penny between them.
Yep.
Somehow it got pulled apart and
Yep.
we got wire.
Yep.
But there was a reason it came in ahead of time schedule and $1 million under budget.
Yeah, no, they are too, well, poor Aldo is no longer with us, but, what a wonderful leader he was, and Jonathan, both of them drove the bus very, very well on that, guided that project beautifully, and it was not easy, I'm sure, and I wasn't even privy to all of the information, but that's what you need. You need leaders like that to focus in on a project and bring it home, and they did it beautifully. That Woodland School is absolutely gorgeous.
And, realistically, that's what we want out of Milford High School.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds corny, but I remember when we first went in, January of '74, the new technology where they had phones in between each classroom.
Yeah.
That was, now they were rotary phones, and we all
Yeah.
laugh at them today,
Yeah.
but
I
it
remember
was,
those,
it was new technology.
Absolutely.
It was a place, even though it had some leaks here and there, we could feel really proud of.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here we are, 40-some years later, and, it was built like a bunker.
Yeah.
And I believe that you can spruce it up, but there's no reason to tear it down.
No, I don't think so, and that's a major, major decision, and of course, that presupposes that you have a location to put another school of such magnitude.
The only place I've heard of is Asylum Street. And the idea of running buses through the university streets and, Ridgewood, or running all the buses up 140, or people from the Medway side having to come all the way across to the Hope, I don't see how that would be feasible.
Yeah, and I know you've got a considerable amount of wetlands there and other things, but that's the work that a committee needs to do. It really does. It has to evaluate potential sites, look at the pluses and minuses, and then cost it out. So that's what a real building committee needs to do. And if you want to do it right, if you want to do it correctly, it is a second job, and it's a lot of work.
So now we look at the big questions that come up. How's the budget looking?
Well, the budget right now, let me just think for a second. The governor has the budget. We obviously passed it in the House. The Senate did. It came through conference committee. So the governor has the budget right now. I'm trying to think for a second. Is it 63 billion or something like that? But the bottom line is the numbers have expanded, and we've been able to allocate resources across the board. Through human service workers, education, healthcare, housing. So I think that the budget, and I don't know exactly, what Milford's numbers are at this point. I didn't get a chance to check, but I would venture to guess that they're very, very generous.
Well, that's critical, because last year you got a $7 million extra, which, thank God, because with 200, people don't understand that when you add 230 kids, that's like adding Memorial School again.
Sure. Yes.
That's an entire Memorial School
Yes.
being added in
Yep.
a year.
Yep. Well, the school system, education drives so much of your local aid. And as you know, the Student Opportunity Act that we passed a couple of cycles ago, Milford, the Milford school system, I think just fit that, demographic, fit that definition to a T, and allowed us to really maximize, the benefits that came to Milford. And that has not happened with a lot of the other surrounding schools, because they don't have the level of SPED kids, low-income kids, or English as a second language student. Milford, really hits on all three, and that's primarily what that funding is looking to address.
I was amazed when I was told that 50% of Milford High School kids get free lunch.
Yes, yes.
I mean, to qualify, I believe you can have a maximum income, family income of $34,000 a year.
Yeah, it's all based on the federal poverty guidelines, and you're right. Milford is at around 50%, whereas Hopedale and Mendon Upton, I believe, are around the 16-17% range.
But it just amazes me.
That's a big difference.
Well, it's huge.
Yeah.
But you start thinking, I mean, not that we're wealthy, but I don't know how you could bring a family. I guess you'd have to if you made $33,000 a year total. Everybody else got to look wealthy compared to it, but God bless.
And what we did, and I worked. Carla Tuttle was very, very helpful with this. As part of the budget, during COVID, the federal government was issuing benefits to the schools so that no student had to pay
Right.
for lunch. Well, that stopped with COVID, but what we did at the state is we picked up the tab, and we're funding it in the budget. So Carla and her staff, they don't have to go try to collect money from kids and deal with that.
So all the kids at Milford High get a free lunch?
Yes, yes. Yep.
That's
So-
wonderful.
Yep, so that's part of our budget. That was one of the things that was pushed for. And Carla was helpful to me, because I would call her and explain her. I would ask her to explain it to me, because the question I had about it was, okay, you're going to get the state reimbursement now at the federal level. Let's call it the federal reimbursement. Is that enough to cover your program? Do you know what I mean? Is that going to be enough to cover the cost, or are you going to have to look to the local school department for more money? And she said no. She said that reimbursement is wonderful. It takes care of the food department. It relieves the burden from the school department, and it worked out well. As soon as I got that go from Carla, I was all on board with that.
Well, I mean, the fact that Carla's taking care of the food gives you a sense of confidence right there.
Oh, yeah. On many levels. Many levels, the actual food itself and also the management, So I think, and again, I'm biased, but boy, I think we got the best school food system in the state.
Well, I remember when the fridge and freezer after 30-some years died.
Yeah.
Carla came in and said, I'm keeping it going with bubble gum and Scotch tape. But all of us looked and said, well, there's a few people in this town, in my mind, that if they come and say, I really need this, that you don't question. When it comes down to food, questioning Carla would be like me questioning the Pope on Catholicism. You know, there's,
And unfortunately, a lot of times, these kids, that's the only nutritious meal they'll have during the day. So it's a huge responsibility, and she takes it seriously, and she does it very well.
that was the hardest thing for me to accept. You know, you read about child malnutrition, and that's somewhere else. But when you start realizing that, no, that's kids who bleed Milford red.
Yep,
You know, these are kids that we see every day.
sure.
It just kind of sent a shiver through my spine.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't be for the richest country in the world, but here we are.
Now, you represent 40,000 people.
Roughly.
How many official Milfordians? Is it still 28,000 or?
No, I think I think it might be just shy of 30. I think the official count in Milford is around 29 to 30. I believe that's what it is.
No, those are legal residents.
Yeah, that's the number that comes, through the town clerk's office to the Secretary of State's office. Not necessarily voting, but your residents.
Because we have at least another, 3,000-4,000 that are probably living here,
Yeah,
not counted.
Exactly. We had always estimated, even back when I was on the select board, that you always had probably another 3,000-4,000 undocumented in the town. Has that number changed? Could be, probably, with things that are going on.
But it hasn't gone down.
It's they're undocumented, so it's difficult to get a read on, where those numbers are. So it was kind of a guesstimate, but I would venture to say that they're at least the same or maybe more.
But you get a feeling because the student population isn't going down.
Yeah.
So if the number of undocumented, illegal, uncounted, whatever you want to call it, these are kids who now live in Milford and families who live in Milford. And, I mean, personally, I have a jaundiced view of them because my grandfather came to Milford in '39, and somebody helped him.
Right.
And he put his head down, and he probably did all the same things that people complain about. Lived with other people, saved every penny he had because he had 3 daughters and a wife back in Portugal.
Yeah.
So, I'm sympathetic to the people who come here, put their heads down, because, I mean, I don't know what I would have to do. And I venture to say you don't either if your children couldn't eat.
Correct.
Okay, my grandfather left his home. And, I see the way you look at your daughters and son, and can you imagine only seeing them once a year?
Well, I do.
Well,
If I'm
now.
lucky. If I'm lucky. The families coming up, from Brazil all through South America, they're escaping, poverty, they're escaping crime, the drug cartels, things that are just horrific. And you're right, but for the grace of God, there goes us. And so it's very difficult, I think, to demonize these people and try to do, what we can. The broader scope, obviously, at the national level, immigration needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, our national government is paralyzed, and that's not going to happen. So that puts us at the state and the local level to deal with it as best we can.
Yeah, but you're limited. You can't deport people to Rhode Island.
No, no.
Realistically,
Right.
the kids come in. And again, I have no sympathy for somebody who comes to the country and starts dealing drugs and creating crime.
Yeah.
To me, they've just given up their rights, don't want to hear it, put them on a plane, send them home.
Right.
But these families that, like my family, like many Milford families, put their heads down, work
Sure.
like dogs, so I could be here, so my mother could come over.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to blame them.
Yeah.
Now, what is the background on this driver's license?
Well, that was the bill that actually got passed. the governor vetoed it. I did not vote to support it, but it is a bill that would allow undocumented persons to get driver's license in Massachusetts. Supposedly, it's going to be a different class of a driver's license in the sense that it doesn't allow them to vote and that type of thing. The problem I had with it, I just was never real comfortable with the level of documentation that we're going to be asking the RMV, to kind of verify. And I've had, situations in my law practice where, I've come into knowledge of certain things and the way things are done and so forth. It just, made me uncomfortable in terms of the level of documentation. So that's how I
But what
looked
was the
at it.
purpose?
Well, the purpose is to allow them to be able to drive legally. The argument is that they will have insured cars, but that's not really, they don't go hand in hand. Right now, a lot of the people who are driving without licenses are driving insured cars. That's not the issue, and having a license doesn't guarantee an insured car, and vice versa. So that was, kind of a misconception that got thrown out there. The big argument in favor is that presumably they will have more awareness of driver safety, and then there'll be the license, so that if something does happen, the police will be able to identify
them.
the purpose, identify the person. But to me, that's a bootstrap argument, because that presupposes that the verification, documentation in the first place was accurate. Identifying the person. So, I understand, the rationale behind it, but I just, kind of saw too many practical issues with it to be able to go forward on it.
What's the alternative?
Well, I think the alternative really is an immigration system that makes sense, that allows these people to come to our country with proper documentation through an immigration authority, not a motor vehicle department, and to get documented, and whether or not it's a visa or an actual citizenship, but to allow them the status to get a regular license just like everybody else.
But now, the numbers I've heard is we've added 2 million residents in the last year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
We only have 300 million people. We're getting close to adding 1%. How long can we keep this up?
Well, that's a big issue. That goes into housing, which is a huge problem right now, not only in Massachusetts, but really throughout the country, in terms of affordable housing for folks to be at. And, again, Milford, I think we were ahead of the curve. We faced this issue about 10 years ago when we had the overcrowded apartment houses and the boarding houses, with the very unsafe conditions. We were in fires all over the place because of faulty electrical. And, we took the bull by the horns to come up with that inspection permitting system, which the health department continues to administer, and the building department very, very successfully, to try to limit that unsafe housing. But to your point, as people come here, more and more housing, safe, affordable housing, is going to be needed. And right now, the way the economy is, and the cost of construction, housing has actually decreased in the last few months.
Well, I remember when those laws first went in, and the way you describe it is the way I remember supporting it. It was for safety.
Yeah.
Not just of the tenants, but the people next door.
And the first responders.
Oh.
I remember getting presented with the pictures from then Fire Chief Toohey of a place up, I'm trying to think of the location, but I can remember the pictures vividly of a basement of one of these older homes in Milford that you and I are very familiar with, and with just sheets hanging up, like a sheet here, a sheet here, a sheet here, a little tablecloth, hugely overloaded electric socket, with all kinds of wires coming out. It was just a disaster waiting to happen.
Forget, you wire a house typically in Milford 200 amps, because you have one kitchen, which is your big draw, and then extensions everywhere else. All of a sudden, you put in 3 kitchens, and you're just asking for a fire.
Well, that's what you had. You had everyone had their own little hot plate and all these other things. And I remember seeing those photographs, and that's why I supported that bylaw. And we got it through town meeting, and that's still successful in Milford.
Yeah, and I remember, I laughed like heck when Paul Mazzucchelli was accused of being discriminatory. I said, seriously, do you know the man's family? Just look back, but look back at a lot of our families. You go back 2, 3 generations, maybe 4, and you find somebody coming to Milford from Europe, from other places. So it's not, well, I have something against this group of people. Those group of people, I always joke and say, the Guatemalans, well, they're just like the Ecuadorians. They're just like the Brazilians. They're just like the Portuguese. They're just like what came first, Irish or Italian?
Well, the Irish came here first, then the
So
Italians.
Italian, then the Irish. I said,
Yeah.
dang these people, they're trying to be just like us.
I know. Yeah, no, Paul did a wonderful job putting that together and spearheading it through. And I think what got lost through all of that was that he wasn't discriminating against any class. He was standing up for the health and safety of these people, because they, were being victimized by these landlords that, they didn't care. More people in the house, the more rent for them. Do you know what I mean? So Paul was actually sticking up for their health and safety, and that's what he did.
And let's see, his job was director of the Board of Health.
Right.
He was doing what we asked him to do.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, when we talk about all these positions, confusion over voting, absentee ballot, early ballot, mail-in ballot.
Yeah, so we passed a Voting Reform Act, which was kind of mirrored on a lot of the provisions that were put in during the COVID pandemic. And it passed, the House and the Senate, and the governor signed it. And essentially, it, allows for mail-in voting. So the Secretary of the Commonwealth would send out applications to households. I've got mine already at the house. You may have gotten yours. And you can fill it out indicating whether or not you'd want to have a ballot mailed to your house. And that's one way to do it. It would allow cities and towns the options to have early voting. So as you know, in Milford, Amy, our town clerk, has set up the
little voting booths.
Yeah, the voting booth right in the lobby there. So you can go a week, or I think it's a week or 10 days before the election. If that's more convenient for you to go vote, you can do that. And the mail-in voting doesn't have to have a reason, like the old absentee ballot. You had to have a reason. Well, I'm going to be out of the country, or well, I'm homesick and I can't do it. So now you don't have no excuse, mail-in voting. The whole idea is to make it as easy and convenient as possible for people in this very busy society that we're in right now to be able to vote, which is probably the most important right that all of us as American citizens possess. It was unfortunate to see that the state Republican Party chose to fight this law and brought an action in the Supreme Judicial Court to try to have it declared unconstitutional. And I was pleased to see that the court threw out that lawsuit and is going to allow this process to start.
Now, the last election we had, and this will be blasphemous to people, I thought Trump did more to assure secure elections than anybody, because he got up and started saying all these elections are going to be tainted and fraudulent. Now, if I'm Secretary of State and you're accusing me of running a shabby show, wouldn't I naturally double up on security and double up on everything to make sure that I come out crystal clean?
Yeah, the fact was that national election was probably the most secure election, I think, ever. And, don't take my word for it. Take the word of 60 judges, many of them appointed by Trump, across the country, that dealt with 60 lawsuits that groups brought declaring elections invalid in various locations, and all 60 of them were thrown out of court.
But did they find, I mean, I have no doubt that you go to Chicago and the daily principle of vote early and often, you could probably find a number of people who broke the rules. But didn't they find that there was no statistical relevance to any fraud?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there may be an isolated case here or two, but I don't know. But, in terms of any type of mass fraud, it simply doesn't happen. And that's what a lot of those 60 lawsuits were alleging without any evidence of at all. And all of them were thrown out in court. So, I mean, you don't get 100% batting average or 1,000% batting average on lawsuits unless you've got a really solid case. And the case for secure and fair elections is very solid. It's unfortunate that many people are following this nonsense that's being still talked about from Donald Trump and people who follow him. And what it does is it undermines probably the basis of our democratic institution, the right to vote and have your vote count towards elected leaders of your choice.
But having your vote count, what you just said is profound. After spending 4 years going to the Soviet Union, they had better voting averages than we ever did. It was 90+% turnout. Of course, if you didn't, you got punished. But it was Russian election. Vote for one of one.
Yeah.
The idea that my vote could be wasted, I'd want somebody strung up by their thumbs.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, what would be the logic? I find it convenient to vote by mail.
Yes.
And that's all it is convenience, because I was traveling an hour and a half to work when I was working up in Woburn and Salem. The voting opened up at 8. So if I was there right at 8 o'clock, I wouldn't get to work till 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Sure, yeah.
Or I'd have to leave early. If I didn't have that option, I'd probably do it anyway. But we had less than 10% of the eligible voters in Milford turn out for the last election. What's the logic of hindering the vote for any reason?
I don't see it. My philosophy has always been to make it as easy and convenient for everyone to be able to vote. Whatever it takes that's going to make it a little bit more convenient for people to vote, I'm in favor of. That's the goal, to get people to exercise their constitutional rights to vote. And unfortunately, we live in a very busy society. There's a lot of distractions. Folks are coping with all kinds of issues, financial, personal, medical, and it's very difficult to sometimes find the concentration and the time to do that. So to your point, being able to fill out a piece of paper at home on your kitchen table when you get a chance to do so, and just dropping it with the mailman, I think speaks volumes in terms of allowing people the ability to access that right.
Now, I've heard that can be a source of fraudulent voting. Is there any evidence that that's the case?
Well, there's none that I know of, and again, I think it's, evident by, all of these lawsuits that have been, undertaken to try to prove this fraudulent and false voting. It's a mantra of Donald Trump and his followers to try to rationalize the fact that he got his butt kicked in the election. And it's unfortunate that there is a segment of the population that actually believes that.
But now, he didn't really get his butt kicked. He lost.
He lost pretty sizable on the general count.
7 million people out of 300 million. I mean, we can argue it all through, but
yeah,
the fact is, he lost.
He lost.
End of story. We have, whether you like him or not, we have a president who won.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not real happy with the outcome right now with my gas price and all.
Well, again, and there's, the president really doesn't have a whole lot that he can affect on gas prices. It's really more of a product of the international and the global market, which, as you see, fluctuates. But that's another that's another discussion and a lot of
Now,
other issues.
is there anything that Beacon Hill can do versus Capitol Hill to help with the gas prices?
Well, we did have some pressure on us to suspend the gas tax. In Massachusetts, I believe the gas tax is 24 cents. So I had a reporter from the Worcester Telegram contact me and, basically asking, well, are you in favor of suspending the gas tax? Are you going to, do you want to do it? And, I got back to this individual and I said, look, the larger question that I see, which I don't see the proponents or the press for that matter asking is, does it work?
Right.
So I went to the AAA table, which has all of the national gas averages, and I compared Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts. Connecticut and New York, of course, have already suspended their gas taxes, and Massachusetts has not. So Connecticut's gas price was probably about 2 or 3 cents less than what we were paying, and New York was actually paying more than what we were paying.
See, and that's what worried me, Brian, is you take out 20 cents. Is the market just going to rise to?
It's important, and that's the problem I had with this reporter and the proponents, because there's no thought behind it. It sounds great. Get rid of the gas tax, save me money. Let's look at it. The gas tax is not imposed at the retail level. The gas operators don't collect the tax and pay it. The gas is imposed at the wholesale market before it gets to the retail level. There is nothing that would guarantee that a reduction of the gas tax would make it to the retail level. So what happened in Connecticut and New York, great, the gas tax was removed. Guess what? The wholesaler kept it and made
Right.
a larger profit and didn't pass it on to the consumer. So as I got back to that reporter, I said, look, if it can be shown to me that it actually works, I'll be in favor of it. But no one, including the people proposing this, can show that it works, and no one in the press is even asking the questions, which is something that you, Mr. Worcester Telegram, ought to be looking at. I never heard from him again. But that was my position on it. So in response to your question, what we have done in terms of trying to give some relief to families in the economic development bill that's right now pending between the House and the Senate, we're providing a rebate to folks whose incomes are between $38,000 a year and $150,000 a year, $250 to an individual and $500 to a married couple. So that's going to be money that's coming right back to you in this year, along with a number of other tax reforms which are permanent, which would make it easier for folks to deal with things financially. That's real money. The suspension of the gas tax was not.
Now you talk about changes to the tax code. What kind of permanent changes are you looking at?
Well, the major one that, and this is not the only one, and I'm trying to think of because there are probably about half a dozen of them. I know the senior citizen circuit breaker got increased. The extended tax credit to working families and children, that got increased. The major one that I come into play with from a legal sense is the estate tax. So right now, Massachusetts is an outlier. We tax estates when people pass away at $1 million. Anything over $1 million, you have to pay a full tax on. $1 million estate is pretty easy to reach.
That's a house.
A house, maybe a bank account, maybe a life insurance policy, and bingo, you're there. So it wasn't just high-end wealthy people that deal with the estate tax. It's everyday, married couples that I come in contact with all the time, certainly in my law practice. So the proposal we have is to increase that to $2 million, and the tax would only be on the money after $2 million, whereas now, if it's a penny over $1 million, you would pay a full tax on that million. So that's a big change, and more in tune with what other states are doing. But in that economic development bill, there are a number of tax benefits that we have, in addition to the tax refund that we're going to be looking to get out.
Well, I can see people leaving Massachusetts as their permanent home
Oh, sure.
if they're going to pay full income, if they're kids. I mean, this is money that you've already paid tax on, right? If you paid off your house, you already paid tax on it, and you want to leave that benefit to your kids, and now they've got to pay full tax on it again?
When you pass away, yeah. The estate tax is definitely difficult, and that's a key point on estate planners. To try to restructure things to try to avoid that tax. So that was, I think, something that was a long time coming.
Is the millionaire's tax still up for grabs?
That is going to be on the ballot. So that is something that everyone will get a chance to vote on, and that would be a 4% surcharge on income over $1 million, net income over $1 million. That's a little bit different, but that's an income tax, and that will be on the ballot in this coming November election. So we'll see what folks decide.
So it would be our normal 5-ish% up to $1 million, and then 9% above.
Correct. Yeah.
Should I be scared about that?
Well, I mean, it
No,
depends on
I'm not making $1 million every year.
Then it won't even affect you.
But I remember the alternate minimum tax
Yeah.
that started out way high and then creeped. Pretty soon, police officers and teachers were caught up in that web. So I just worry that the minute you start down the line of saying it's only, when I ask people, is it okay to tax the rich? Yes. What's rich?
Right.
And
Right.
normally it's somebody who makes $1 more than I do.
Right. Right.
As long as the
Yeah.
level is above my head,
Yeah.
so that when I say should I be worried, will it creep down eventually and bite all of us?
Well, no, I mean, this is a specific, amendment to the Constitution that has to be voted on. So that's solid. That is what it is. And it's something that's been drumming around in the 6 years that I've been in the legislature. So to try to get something like this through is not easy. And you're talking about really a reform to the overall income tax code, to a progressive type tax, and that's not part of the discussion at all.
Okay, because that's why I get worried.
Yeah, no, this is pretty clear. It is what it is, and it's going to be dependent upon a citizen's vote.
Anything else coming up on tax ideas?
On tax ideas, like I said, I wish I could remember. I know there was probably a good half a dozen, different tax reforms in that economic development bill that are going to benefit people. I think it's going to cost the state about $500–600 million a year, because these are permanent tax reforms that are in place, not one-time.
But that's not too terrible on a $50 billion budget.
No, it's not.
I mean, 500 million, you know me, I'm cheap as can be, but it sounds like a ton of money, but on 50 billion?
Yeah, it's not when you look at it that way, except, economies have downturns also, and sometimes revenue doesn't come in as projected. And like the state budget, the town is a microcosm of the state. A large amount of the state budget is your mass health, your Medicaid through the federal government and that type of thing. So that chews up a lot of the budget. And then you've got your local aid. So when you boil it down, the discretionary spending does become a lot narrower than the ultimate, $50 or $60 billion.
Now, when we start talking about the impact locally, is there anything that the state can do about the federal movement of immigrants into Massachusetts?
That's the problem. I mean, it's a federal question. The immigration is a federal issue, and at the state level, we've just got to try to deal with the consequences.
Because again, when we were for the longest time, I used to bust Kevin McIntyre's back about, tell me why you need all this extra space. 1 kid per year. We were 40 years out, And I remember 74, we graduated 222 kids. 40 years later, we graduated 262 kids.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, that's one per year. How do you need more geography? But now all of a sudden with 300.
Well, yeah, and the numbers, like you said, have been relatively stable for a long time in the Milford school system and have dramatically increased as far as I understand this past year. But, I mean, we've allocated money in the budget to help refugees from Afghanistan. We've allocated funds this year to help refugees from the Ukraine. So there are things that we can do on the state level to try to help people that come to this country for refuge and, to escape, obviously, the violent conditions that exist in those countries. But, it really is a federal issue that should be handled federally, but unfortunately, the federal government is paralyzed, and we can't really expect much relief from Washington.
No, we're just going to keep getting more immigrants.
Possibly.
Well, it seems every year we get 200 more kids. They're coming with families. But again, it's kind of hard because I don't know that I could look at a kid down on the border that says, please help me, and turn my back or, kick the kid down the road.
No, you can't. And, if a child comes into the system, regardless of how he or she came here, we're obligated by law to educate that child and provide all of the other resources that we do in the school system. And that's what we've got to try to continue doing.
And, don't take this wrong because you're on Beacon Hill, but I've always said, frankly, I trust Milford Town Meeting to take care of the kids, not because Beacon Hill or Capitol Hill has told us we have to, but it's the Milford way.
Oh, sure.
We take care of our own.
Yep, absolutely.
And the minute a kid comes into the system, they bleed Milford red.
Yep.
They're one of ours. We got to figure out how to take care of them.
The Scarlet Hawks. That's right. Absolutely.
So what do you see as the big issues coming up for the next year?
Well, I mean, I think as we get out of formal session, now you're going to be getting into politics, and you're going to be getting ready for the election cycle come November. So I think the reason why the formal session ends, on the election year, July 31st, because, we all have to go out and, campaign and try to get reelected in November. So I think that's what you're going to be seeing now. You're going to be seeing a lot of the campaign stops from folks, governor's race, attorney general, lieutenant governor, auditor. There are a number of statewide races that I think, people will be looking towards and, trying to choose the candidate that they like.
Do you see your position having somebody run against you?
No one. I'm unopposed this election, which is always nice. It doesn't happen to me too often, so I enjoy it when I can.
Because, I mean, I was amazed when I saw that it could cost $25,000 to be on the select board.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
can't imagine what it must be to run for Beacon
I mean,
Hill.
it's as much as you want. I have some of my colleagues, they have, $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 in their campaign chest. And it depends upon the district that they're in, how they get targeted. I've never really been an advocate of having that money. Whenever I ran for select board and even school committee, I was always outspent. Always outspent. I was never the high spender that I can remember. And, to me, it's not so much, what you spend, it's how you spend it. So it's targeted mailings, but I think any successful campaign really revolves around getting out on the streets and going to people's doors, and that doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And that was always the focal point of my campaigns, and fortunately I was lucky enough to physically be able to do that and do it well, and I think that's how you keep your campaign costs down.
Well, that was one of the reasons a lot of people thought Dick Moore got unelected, is that Fat Man just outran him.
Oh, yeah. Ryan, Senator Fat Man, is very, very enthusiastic campaigner. Again, to me, a young kid. I call him a kid all the time, and that's what he
But
does.
he went to houses not once but 2 or 3 times.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, and I
yeah.
just because
He's got a lot of energy. He's got 4 kids now, so he's gonna.
now he's got to run.
I said, "Oh my goodness, how can you do it with 4 children?" But he does, and he takes 1 or more of his kids with him at events, which I think is wonderful. And he's not going to be the senator for Milford anymore because redistricting. He lost Milford and Bellingham, I believe.
Yeah, we picked up Becca.
Yeah, Becca Rauch right now is the senator who will be in line. Her district will be in line for Milford. And Ryan, Senator Fatman, his district got pushed more westward. He picked up a number of towns on the western end of the district.
So you're the 10th.
Yes,
You really just moved a little bit away from Medway,
yes,
and the rest of it's the same.
yes, yes.
Well, that makes it easier.
And I'm very fortunate because, I've got, great ties to Hopedale and of course Mendon. So there are 3 communities that, I feel very comfortable with. And, I think you just have, wonderful people living there. And I think I'm very, very lucky to have the 3 towns that I do.
Well, it's got to be easier that you've been covering the 3 towns. Then, it's not like the Barney Frank thing where, okay, you're going to start from square one.
Well, I mean, yeah, but even beyond that, I mean, I've been a practicing attorney for 37 years.
Oh.
And, I've had a number of clients and people that I've helped in Mendon and Hopedale. And, that's just, something that, that you develop relationships and that's kind of nice.
Well, we'll have one more chance before the election.
Sure, whenever. Give me
I
a
don't think
ring.
we can, our 6 loyal viewers can't affect your total if you're running unopposed.
No, that's right, yeah.
But let's just hope that you keep bringing, 150 grand for Fino is really nice.
Yeah, that was good. I got another 40 grand for the Upper Charles Trail because they want to put a connection into the Walden Woods.
Yeah.
So that project got brought to me through the Walden Woods. So we've got a few little pieces coming
Yeah, and
into
that
the
extra
town.
7 million you came up with last year, that we're not forgetting either.
Okay, we'll add to that.
Because
too,
when
sure.
Kevin started saying that they needed 6 million extra, I remember saying, I don't know what narcotics you're on, but why don't you share it?
Yeah,
Where are we going to come up with an incremental 6 million?
right.
And luckily, you came up with it from Beacon Hill.
Right. Well, again, that goes back. Everything is foundational based, and that foundation was laid with the Student Opportunity Act, which I had a chance to work on a little bit, and the formula, like we said, fits Milford to a T.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to hearing what new things you'll bring us in a few months.
Absolutely, thank you. I like being here, and I love your new living room.
It's comfortable now.
It really is.
And as always, thank you for joining. To our 6 loyal viewers, we'll be talking about begging you to get out and vote, because last year with under 10% was a bit disappointing. I'll never ask you to vote for a particular candidate, but I'll beg you to vote. Get out there and let your voice be heard. And as always, may God bless, may tomorrow be a better day than today. Thank you. And thanks for all the money you bring in.
Okay, yeah.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just